We go inside the injury situations from multiple Baltimore Ravens players, including Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, and more. Is there cause for concern? Is there no need to worry? We talk about that and a lot more coming up next on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like this video and subscribe to the channel as a whole. Also in audio form, where you can subscribe and follow along over there wherever you get your favorite podcast. For 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, Monday through Friday, plus some good bonus content as well as we dive into all things Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We return here on this midweek edition of the show. On today's show, I'm going to be diving a lot into some injury situations for the Ravens. Now, I'm no doctor, but we're gonna put on the doctor hat today. We're gonna put on the stethoscope, and we're gonna try to dive into these injury situations. Look at these guys, their injury histories, what we know, what we don't know. We're not gonna overly speculate about things. I'm just gonna try to present the facts, and then from that, we can determine if we are concerned or not about it. So I'm not gonna say, oh, this guy has this injury. But again, the Baltimore Ravens have had some injury questions, and I haven't really taken an episode to address them. And with us being in that lull period, I thought today was the day. So we'll talk about Marlon Humphrey a bit in that corner room as a whole in the first segment. Then we'll move to the other part of the secondary, Kyle Hamilton and that safety group. And then we'll move into some uniform updates. The Ravens releasing a new alternate helmet on Tuesday. Everybody seems to be excited about it. Some varying opinions on it. So if you have an opinion on it, do you like it? Do you not? Be sure to put that in the comments below on YouTube. So let's dive into it right here. Starting off with Marlon Humphrey. I think this is the one that everybody, because look, Kyle Hamilton's a huge piece of this defense, obviously, but so is Marlon Humphrey. But Humphrey seems to be the one that we don't know a lot about it. John Harbaugh was very vague when discussing the whole thing, saying it was just nagging stuff and he should be a full go for training camp, but we don't really know where this came from. So when we do injuries here and we look at injuries on Locked On Ravens, what I like to do is I like to go to Draft Sharks. Draft Sharks has a very comprehensive just diagram and list. It lists off all the injuries that a player has suffered, lists off risks. So I just want to start with, I'm just going to do 2023, right? I think the stuff that he suffered earlier in his career, chest, groin, shoulder, back stuff, I'm not going to focus on that. He had the foot injury. I think he suffered that, in a practice, right? If I'm not mistaken. And so he had to get that surgery in mid-August, missed the first 4 games of the year in 2023. But here's where I'm really focusing. I'm focusing on the calf. He had the calf. If you remember against Cleveland, it was that non-contact injury. The replay was awful. Everybody thought he was done for the season. Ended up not being, because people thought, it was a non-contact thing. People say, oh, that's an Achilles, and there was, I think people overanalyze the video a little bit to say, oh, well, that's where the Achilles pops, when it obviously never happened. But with calf injuries and Achilles injuries, sometimes those videos can look very similar. And if you don't have the right angle, and there wasn't one on the Humphrey injury, I think people are quick to assume, oh, that's a non-contact Achilles. But it was a calf injury for Marlon. He ended up, I think he missed 2 games, it says here. So it felt like he missed longer, but he returned. And then I think he re-aggravated that injury later in the year in week 17 against Miami. And then clearly wasn't healthy, at least 100% healthy for the playoff run. So what I wanted to do is, we don't really know a lot about what this new thing is. Is it even a new thing that popped up for Marlon? So again, we're not going to speculate on it, but I do want to just talk about calf injuries, because I've seen this across all sports. And when you look at the actual calf itself, there are a lot of factors that can lead to re-injury, and it actually is decently common, calf injuries that can have complications. And actually here, when you look up some of the, commonness of calf re-injuries and what that all looks like, there are a lot of things that say sometimes these calf strains can become chronic because they can cause scar tissue or muscular adhesions that make the area more likely to be injured again or prevent healing. So there are a lot of things that can cause that, a lot of things that can cause re-injury, not allowing enough recovery time, not being, not applying ice or whatnot, cold with heat, taking the right vitamins, we could go on and on and on and on. I don't think it was anything Marlon necessarily did if this is the calf, because again, this could just be something, it's a new thing that popped up and he just needs time to recover. But if I did have to guess, and we're not going to overly speculate here, right? But if I did have to guess, maybe it's just some complications with the calf and him getting back to 100%. And at this point in the offseason, why would you risk it if there's still a little soreness, if stuff is going on? And we're going to talk more in detail with Kadri Ismail tomorrow, who, again, is a former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, but also he is an injury specialist, a performance specialist. So we're going to talk with him about this more. So be sure to stay tuned for tomorrow's episode because we will go into more detail here. I'm just kind of prefacing what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. But with these calf injuries, they can be very delicate, and if not managed properly, and again, intentional or not intentional, things can pop up there. And you don't want that to be something that's lingering. I mean, we are in June right now. You don't have to have Marlon out there at mandatory minicamp practicing. Obviously, if it is the calf, it's a little concerning, but I'm not pushing the panic button right now. There's still a lot of time between now and training camp. If it is the calf, then I would say, look, if he's not full go for training camp, then there is a lot more concern for me. I've said this before. I'll say it again. My concern level for Marlon right now is probably right around a 2 to a 3. So we can round that to 2.5. I think if he doesn't show up in his, fully healthy at training camp and full go at training camp, that probably moves up past 5, past 6. So I hope it's nothing crazy. Again, John Harbaugh, very just on the down low, says it's nagging stuff. I don't know what else it could be. Again, that's why we're not going to overly speculate here, because it literally could be anything. So, there hasn't been anything that's been put out about it. But in that corner room in particular, Marlon is really important. I know that the discourse around Marlon, he had a really rough year last year, and at least by his standards, right? Like, I think everybody expects Marlon to be in that top 5 category. He was in that top 5 category for many seasons. Now, I think a lot of people have him more in that top 10, top 12 conversation. Still an elite corner 1 in this league, but it was a struggle at times for him last season. And I think a lot of that had to do with just he was injured for most of it. I mean, for all of it, honestly. I don't even know if he recovered fully from the foot thing. Like, I'm sure he was healthy enough to play, but was he feeling 100% himself? That's why I think the offseason is so important. But I'm not putting Marlon out there from the Ravens in minicamp if there's anything that he's feeling. I mean, it's the same thing with a lot of these guys. It's precautionary. All these sports do it. All these leagues do it. All these teams do it. When you have stuff this early in the offseason, and again, we are early in the offseason, and by the way, we know when the Ravens are reporting to training camp now. We will talk about that in the final part of the show because there are more updates with that. But for Marlon, I hope that everything can be put behind him by the time training camp starts. There are a lot of different plans that he can use, and whether it is the calf or not, I think you just want him to be healthy, because even though you have Brandon Stevens, who was incredible last season, Arthur Millette in the slot was great for them as their starting guy. You drafted 2 corners in Nate Wiggins and TJ Tampa. We know how good Marlon is. We know how much of an important player he is. We know his physicality is also very welcome, and the ability for him to play a lot of different places, both on the outside and in the slot. You need to have all your explosion for that, and that's something we're going to talk about tomorrow with Q2, is the explosion element of this if a lot of stuff lingers for him, which hopefully it will not. But the explosion that Marlon has to have, the explosion that all these players have to have, it's so important in today's NFL. So, again, in fact, all of the stuff Marlon suffered last year was lower body between foot and calf. And, with not knowing what it is, kind of putting the pieces together, but not fully doing it, not to overly speculate. I feel like in this cornerback room, you can see, I guess you can survive an injury to Marlon Humphrey, but it would be really hard because Brandon Stevens being a full-time number one corner. Brandon Stevens stepped in and did incredible for Marlon when he was injured last season. It was one of the reasons why the defense was so good, because they didn't have a drop-off between Marlon and Brandon Stevens, and Ronald Darby stepped up and played well. I think the Ravens, again, replaced Ronald Darby and Rocky Ya-Sin with Nate Wiggins and TJ Tampa. That's a net win, in my opinion. That is a net win for the Ravens. But in my opinion here, we're going to have to see just what this is. Again, there could be no reason for concern whatsoever, right? That's why I'm not ranking this very high, because we just don't know, right? We just don't know. And what John Harbaugh said, him being fully ready, if that's the case, then cool. We can just put it behind us and move on. But for now, I think with that uncertainty, it just has a lot of fans and a lot of people just like, okay, well, what's the situation going on here? Draft Shark also quickly does have risks for injuries in terms of each specific player. So again, there's a chance of injury for everybody. Marlon has a 50.8% chance of injury, and that means a percent chance to miss at least 2 quarters. I think a lot of people are up there. And I think, look, a lot of people have a chance to miss 2 quarters of an 18-week season, right? 4.1% injury per game. He's projected to miss 2.5 games in 2024. Does have a 5 out of 5 durability scale. So all in all, Draft Sharks has Marlon at a medium risk for injury in 2024. But again, we have to see what the injury is now and if it's all cleared up by the time training camp begins. So the corner room is in a good spot right now overall, I think. If you have Marlon, Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins, TJ Tampa is your top 4, with Arthur Millette obviously being your slot guy. But Marlon is the most important piece in that cornerback room, regardless of what his 2023 season was for the Ravens last year. Coming up with the second part of the show, we'll move to the safety position, talk about Kyle Hamilton. Is there cause for concern? Is there not? Stay tuned. We've got a lot to get to here on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. Now, I love going to MLB games personally. It's something that my dad and I did from when I was a very young age. And, you know, for me, there are a lot of Orioles games, me being from Baltimore, I've been to. One of my favorites, though, well, not really my favorite in terms of the final score, but I was at the most runs scored in a game in history in the MLB, 30-3. It was the Rangers beating the Orioles. But, you know, looking back on that and saying I was at that game with my dad and my brother, something I always tell people, and I wish they'd been on the winning side of that. But still, it's really important also to make new memories this year as well. And Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with care to last minute deals, all in prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Now, on the Gametime app, I mentioned the Orioles. They are in the midst of a 3-game set with the Yankees right now. They dropped game 1, but that's in New York. When the Orioles get back, there are plenty of incredible games to be able to go to, including some great divisional AL East matchups as well. And on the Gametime app, they make it really easy over there. There are a bunch of great features, and one of my favorites is last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Plus, again, the interface is great. It makes it easy to navigate around and figure out where you are on the app, and other features include flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and more. Take the guesswork of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Down the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms by again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spell LCKED1NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime with the last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Wednesday. Again, appreciate you being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. And also be sure to make Locked On Sports Today with Peter Bukowski a part of your day as well. He covers all sports all the time. Peter has you over there, so be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We talked about Marlon Humphrey, the Baltimore injury situation with him, and the timeline and everything. I mean, in terms of timeline with Marlon, it's hard to say right now because we don't know what it is. But if it's the calf thing, you got to manage that throughout the season if it doesn't get any better, or if it's still not 100% by the time it starts. But again, we don't know. So I'm not going to overly speculate on if it is or not. Just wanted to put that out there. But now Kyle Hamilton, we talk about important pieces. I mentioned Hamilton, a majorly important piece of this defense. John Harbaugh saying he had a procedure to get some loose bodies removed in his elbow. Now, we talked about this with Kadri Ismail last week, and again, I will bring this up with him again this week, so be sure to stay tuned. Our episode with him is going to be tomorrow. But the loose body thing, Q said look, that's a pretty common thing, right? When you have a bunch of collisions, you play a collision sport, a very physical sport, sometimes that happens, chipping and all that happens. So what it has here is the elbow arthroscopy, excuse me. I read that wrong. It's a minimally invasive procedure. It allows the surgeon to view the elbow joint through small incisions, and then the loose body can be identified and removed using the arthroscopic instrument. So again, minimally invasive. John Harbaugh seemed pretty confident he'd be full go for training camp. This one to me is not a concern, right? Again, and why is it not a concern? Because we know what it is. That's just part of it. We know what it is. So we know that Hamilton had the MCL stuff, and actually we can go to his draft chart profile if we want to right here, because there is a recent injury bit on Kyle Hamilton. So again, it's just a matter of for him when he's able to come back, but I'm not concerned about this whatsoever for me. I mean, at the end of the day, Hamilton's a player where this elbow thing shouldn't be too crazy. I'm trying to find the recovery timeline of this here. Elbow bone chip, I guess, or this surgery, this says it may need 6 to 8 weeks, but the Ravens have about a month or so before vets report to training camp again. We'll talk about that in the final part of the show. And Hamilton hasn't been practicing, so I would assume that puts him, if that is the case, on track to be full go by training camp. So it's not a lower body thing. I think if it was, that'd be a little more concerning. But again, I think Kadri Ismail will have a lot more insight for us tomorrow. And actually, if you want to go back and listen to our episode from last week on Thursday, we talked a lot about them as well. But in my opinion, I think for Hamilton and the safety room in general, we've talked about it a lot, where for Hamilton in general, it's just like, okay, he has to stay on the field. He has to be healthy. The Baltimore defense, and we saw this, Hamilton went down and the Baltimore defense was, I don't want to say lost their identity fully, but it was definitely a shift. Hamilton does so much. He covers so much ground. And in my opinion, he's probably, look, Roquan is awesome, and I love Roquan, and he is, I think, the heart and the soul of that defense. But Kyle Hamilton, I think, is the brain of that defense. And not that Roquan isn't moving guys around and putting guys in spots, but Hamilton he's their Swiss Army knife. He is their chess piece. So, in my opinion, that's just going to be the thing. It says I have to, I'm trying to find his injury guide quickly, but I don't think it's going to let me, not going to let me find this for some reason. Let me try one more thing. But as I'm talking, Hamilton is so important because of what he brings to the table. You can line him up at the line of scrimmage, on the edge. We know against the Colts, he absolutely wreaked havoc on Gardner Minshew in the first half. But then you can line him up as a guy that can roam around, cover tight ends, cover running backs. How many years did we talk about how Baltimore had struggled to cover tight ends and running backs, especially out of the backfield and out of the inline position? Hamilton covers a lot of that up. You can play Hamilton as a big slot. We've seen him play in that role too. So having him healthy for the full season is very, very important. Now, Hamilton has had 3 injuries over the course of his career. Knee strain, that was last year against Carolina. He had that was the last game of the season. He had the wrist thing, and then he had the MCL sprain in the Rams game in week 14. Now, they actually classify Hamilton as a high-risk injury. 75.3% chance to miss more than 2 quarters, 7.9 chance of injury per game. He's projected to miss 2 games in 2024, still a 5 durability score. I feel like that's high. I mean, I get he's had an injury in the past, like his 2 years, he's had 2 injuries, or I guess 3. But I don't know. This is not related to the elbow whatsoever. Hamilton should be fine for training camp. There's no concern for me in terms of him, having this linger throughout the season. Should be good to go by the time the season starts at the very latest. Like if you want to say, he's not going to be fully ready for training camp. I mean, he's going to be okay in my opinion. I think he will be. But again, we will talk more with Kadri Ismail about it tomorrow. The safety room, though, you got Marcus Williams. And he's somebody that it's going to, he was very vocal about being a leader and didn't really talk too much about his injury history. But, the Ravens' injury history, at least, which has been decently extensive, unfortunately. But other than that, it's Sanusi Kane, it's Ardarius Washington, it's Bo Braid. Not a lot of crazy, proven depth. But there was a comment, and I'm actually going to pull this comment up from yesterday's show. We talked about this a little bit as well. So I'm going to quickly find this, but it was about the safety position as opposed to other positions on the defense. So it was actually interesting to me, and I wanted to bring it up quickly because it does have relevance to what we're talking about right now. But we have, who is it from? Here we go, from Coach White. He says, here's the difference with defensive end positions of last year and the safety position this year. The Ravens felt they needed production at defensive end. Last year, nobody knew, including Geno Stone. He will have a year like he did. We're lucky Geno that was a 7th-round pick that got cut. I believe the Ravens are seeing the same thing with the safety position again. That's why they're dragging their feet to bring somebody in if they do. I mean, and this is an interesting comment, and I appreciate the comment, Coach White, because yeah, I mean, his point is, like, who thought, raise your hand if you thought Geno Stone was going to be as impactful and effective as he was last season. I mean, I don't think he get a lot of hands, right? I think everybody knew that Geno could do it, and we saw him step up, and he was great for Marcus in 2022 when he went down. But, did everybody expect him to have a career year? There'd be no drop off. I think they like Ardarius Washington a lot, and they know this is more of a younger guy step up year. But if Williams goes down, if Hamilton goes down, are you going to get that same Geno production? You could. I'm not ruling out these young guys. That'd be unfair, and I'm not going to do that. But I still think that maybe, I'm still going to say they should bring in some safety depth, but it is an interesting conversation because, look, I don't think it's the end of the world if they don't, right? I just want to put that out there. I just think it would add some more stability to the room if they did, and that's it, right? That's it. So maybe it's Jamal Adams, maybe it's Justin Simmons, maybe it's somebody else. The pickings continue to get slim. I think Marcus May signed with the Dolphins a couple days ago. So, you're continuing to get these signings, not one after the other, but guys are going off the board. So we'll see. But Baltimore will have some decisions to make. Coming up in the final part of the show, though, we'll talk about some uniform updates. Obviously, the Ravens unveiling a new alternate helmet on Tuesday. Talk about when the Ravens are reporting to training camp and a lot more. Stay tuned. We got a lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. We're back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Wednesday. Again, really appreciate everybody being here and making us your first listen each and every day here on Locked On Ravens, whether you're in video form, whether you're in audio form. Either way, you're not missing out on the show. So if you want to watch one day, listen another, you can absolutely do that. We started off in audio form. And then after 2 years, we moved into the video side of things, and both communities have been absolutely incredible. Social media, we've been great too. Starting up Instagram again, so be sure to follow me over on Instagram and Twitter at ChaosStriker34. Subtext has been amazing as well. Now, the Ravens, they decided that they wanted to drop some news on Tuesday. So we got the alternate helmets that were rumored to be coming out, and let me tell you, there were definitely some mixed responses, I would say, on this. Now, they're going to be wearing these one time during the season. It's an alternate helmet. They're branding this as Purple Rising. So essentially, it is a purple helmet. It's the first time. So we know the Ravens had their original helmet in 96 when they came into the league, 1996. And then that's when, I think in 1999, if I'm not mistaken, they transitioned over to the Black Bird helmet, which we see today. That was the second helmet they made. I apologize if it wasn't 1999. I remember seeing that. But then that's the helmet they've had from then on. So this is the third helmet in team history, and it is a purple helmet. It has the front-facing bird on the helmet, and then it has two gold stripes going, to the front to the back of the helmet. It's a gold face mask, so purple helmet, gold face mask. Has more decal on the back and everything. So personally, I think it's a cool helmet. I think the front bird is cool. And I know there are some people who are kind of thinking, oh, this is a Vikings thing. And it does look like Minnesota a little bit. Like I'm not going to say it doesn't, but this, they anticipate, again, doesn't work with any uniform but the color rush. So the color rush, that's how the Ravens marketed it. They had Nate Wiggins, Anafe Owe, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers was the big poster boy for this. So he was doing that. They put out a video. But the color rush really haven't been used that much by Baltimore really since it came out. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how this looks like on the field. But from the players modeling it and seeing the guys in the helmet with the color rush, I think what happened, is they released the helmet first, and then they released the pictures and everything that goes along with it. So the helmet by itself, you kind of think, oh, okay, what's going to happen here? And then they release it with the color rush and everyone's like, okay, like now it at least makes sense of what it actually is going to go with and what they can actually do with this and use it. So again, very mixed reviews. I think some people loved it. Other people hated it. I personally think it's cool. Like I like it, but I know, again, if you have an opinion, please put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear all the opinions. We can talk about it down there. I think it's just different, right? The Ravens I don't really know when the last time, it might've been the color rush when the Ravens introduced a new uniform type deal. I don't think we've had, unless I'm not remembering, I don't think we've had anything since then in terms of announcements. So it's just cool for the Ravens to switch up their concepts, and who knows, maybe we'll see it more than one time in a couple of seasons. But yeah, really cool for the Ravens to add that to their repertoire. Now, in terms of training camp, the Ravens rookies are reporting to training camp July 13th, the veterans on July 20th. That's really early. The July 13th report date, I believe, is the earliest report day in the NFL. I'm going to try to confirm that quickly, but it is their July 20th report date for vets. Obviously, they're going to go a little earlier because of the fact that they're playing the Chiefs in week 1 on Thursday night. So they're reporting a couple days earlier. Both the Chiefs and the Ravens, their vets report on the 20th. They're the only two teams that have their vets reporting on the 20th. Everybody else is reporting at least, well, actually, there is one team that's reporting earlier, and that's the Houston Texans, who have their rookies and vets reporting on the same day, the 17th. So out of all the teams in the NFL, the Ravens and the Chiefs are tied for the second earliest report date. The Texans are number 1 in terms of earliest report date. In terms of the rookies, I'm looking, and yep, the Ravens have the earliest rookie report date out of everybody, July 13th. The next closest is, I believe, July 16th, and that's a couple different teams. Other than that, everybody else is in that 720 range, 722 range. So it's exciting. I mean, look, we're less than a month out for rookies. We're about a month out. Tomorrow's going to be a month away from veterans reporting to training camp, and that's when the journey starts. When we'll know more about Marlon, we'll know more about Kyle Hamilton, and that whole conversation we were having. So about are these guys going to be full go or not? But again, I'm not sure I'm expecting so much in way of roster moves. I've had this conversation over the last couple of days. So if you're an everyday, you're kind of like, again, Kevin, we're doing this again. But it's true. I mean, I think it'd be great if they added somebody. I'm just not sure what it's going to look like. I'm sure we'll see vets continue to slowly move off the market and go off the market, but I don't know if the Ravens are going to be a part of that. It just feels like they have such a belief in their younger players, and they want to see what they have in those guys. And it's not just like, oh, let's see what we have, and that's that. That's not what they're telling themselves. Like, oh, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. They really believe that they can make impacts. I think, and again, the poster child for that, I think, is Rashad Bateman and how they've kind of handled his situation throughout the entirety of this offseason, not bringing in competition for him, letting Odell walk, and kind of re-signing Nelson Aguilar support, not as competition. So they have a lot of young guys who need to step up, but I don't know. We're creeping along until we finally get to training camp. So exciting stuff, and we will see how everything plays out for them injury-wise. But again, I'm not ready to hit the panic button on Humphrey, on Hamilton, even for guys like David Ajabo, who's, doing work off of the side field, Adisa Isaac, who ended up hurting himself in minicamp, right? Or in rookie minicamp. That's not something I'm concerned about either. So again, once we get to training camp, that concern level goes up, but we're not there yet. And we'll have to see what it looks like when that actually happens. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content. Of course, be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form, audio form. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.